right? Based upon them being more-ish people, today we refer to it in English as more-ish, right? So all ecclesiastical law in Scripture is basically a state law, right? It's all being practiced in the form of representing the true and living estate. The true and living estate only becomes compromised when it is abandoned. It is abandoned when one takes upon a separate nationality that is not his own, or when one marries a nationality that historically has had no estates. So what would those be? Who would that apply to? Well, if you go by modern context, that would apply to us, right? Well, not us, but those of us who are undeclared and have not chosen who and what vine and fig tree they choose to stand under. It was just brought up in court that chick Paula Deen, the chick that actually brought her to court, was actually a Caucasian woman. And the Caucasian woman was bringing her to court for racism. So what the judge did was that the judge ruled that Paula Deen could not be racist to white people, or that the woman had no case because the woman herself was white. So what this then means is that white people cannot sue other white people for being racist. So by the same delegation, that would mean then that black people cannot sue other black people for being racist or racial discrimination. Therefore, the grounds that Paula Deen would have to be tried on or brought out would be the discrimination against one's nationality. See, you could discriminating against one nationality then brings international treaties and stuff into play. Interesting thing that was put out, Clarence Thomas, who's they say is always sleeping on the bench or at least acting like that, but that's Steven, that's Django and Steven acting like he crippled. You know what I mean? So Thomas acting like he don't have no real sense, right? But remember, everybody calling him a sellout. Speaking to a noble today, he was like, yeah, well he basically brought it in context is that you can't call, if you call this dude a sellout, then you got to call people like Wanda Sykes and Angela Davis sellouts too, because they married to white women. So if being a sellout now, or the basis of that is being married to a Caucasian woman, you know what I'm saying, that's very flimsy nowadays, because nowadays our people are running away from their nationality so much, they're willing to be anything else. Therefore, you see the opposite happening in Caucasian people in terms of how a lot of their societal norms are being spread, meaning that whenever you're dealing with race, like they'd rather you call them a devil than call them a racist. You know what I'm saying? Because calling a Caucasian person a racist would mean that they are somehow, in their mind, you basically comparing them to the Klan or something. Now, this don't mean a lot of their family members and stuff like that ain't come from that era, which they did. But for whatever reason, being called that today is an anathema to them, right? But what he said was interesting. He wound up waking up on a bench. The whole subject was about gun control, and what he basically said was and they were talking about the right to bear arms, he just woke up and started going on a little diatribe. And he basically said, and I quote, referring to the disarmament of blacks during the post-Reconstruction era, Clarence Thomas wrote, it was the duty of the white citizen patrols to search Negro houses and other suspected places for firearms. If they found any firearms, the patrols were to take the offending slave to the free black offending slave or free black to the nearest justice of the peace, whereupon he would be severely punished. Go back in your room. And the torture of the opinion, right? Well, let me read it again. I'm sorry. Referring to the disarming of blacks during the post-Reconstruction era, Thomas wrote, it was the duty of the white citizen patrols to search Negro houses and other suspected places for firearms. If they found any firearms, the patrols were to take the offending slave or free black to the nearest justice of the peace, whereupon he would be severely punished. Never again, Thomas says. In a scorcher of an opinion that reads like a mix of Black History lesson and Black Panther Party manifesto, He goes on to say, militias such as the Ku Klux Klan, Knights of the White Camellia, the White Brotherhood, the Pale Faces, and the 76 Association spread terror among blacks. Using firearms for self-defense was often the only way for citizens to protect themselves from mob violence. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, man, sometimes even the most quote-unquote sell-outest nigga will be the one to just have a flashback and remember his days in the projects or something and go ham on these white people and shake them up. It ain't going to necessarily change a lot, you know what I'm saying? But the thing about gun control is this. There's no way they're going to be able to take guns just from black people. They're not going to be able to do it because they're actually people in play, governmental things that's already set up for in the case they do that, certain other parts of the government come online. See, that's the other part of the situation that they're scared of as well when they talk about their little New World Order thing. There's factions within factions within factions of their so-called government. And most of these things are bonded with these so-called fraternal organizations, whether people want to believe the extent of them or not. And some of them are very, very cryptic in nature, but some of them only come online and activated when aspects of this country go so awry that the only way that they can preserve themselves is by producing different ways of warfare against the current government itself. This is within its own government. This is what's called the shadow cabinet. And within this shadow cabinet, who knows is in it? But the point is, this is what happens within empires as they begin the twilight. You know what I'm saying? Whenever empires begin the twilight, they begin to go through instances where they create secret police and all that type of stuff. Same way the Nazis did, same way so-called Romans did at the time that Khan and them came, Attila and them came, took everything. It's the same situation. So the declaration or becoming a national, one's own original government, meaning the government that exists still in the world and is accessed via the Board Science Temple, is one of the only ways for one to safeguard themselves against the situation, unless you declare nationality from some other foreign power. You know, like if you're not going to claim Moorish nationality, cool, do that, but don't do that if that's what you want to do, but claim something, man. Get a Ghanaian passport or some country that got their own thing popping that happens to be melanated. Even if you may not agree with all of their politics, have something, because the United States has already listed all of its so-called property as hostiles within the field based upon the United States Battleground Act. And all of these false flag situations going down, this dude killing his wife, posting it on Facebook, you know what I'm saying? Other day, a young brother, blessed to death, Israel Ramirez, great young brother. He's a skater around here with the little skating crew they got. He was ruthlessly, basically ran down and murdered by the police, you know. And right down the block from where my son takes Taekwondo, you know what I'm saying? That's how close these things be sometimes. And, you know, and seeing how the people rallied behind, they all got together. They was banging F the police, and they was going in, man. They went in on the police, man, to the point where they backed them down, you know what I'm saying? But again, these are people with no knowledge of self. They think that they, you know, whatever they are in terms of being Spanish, as if that is an actual nationality, is not. But they rallying behind each other where it is, because at least they have a language that they rallying behind, you know what I'm saying? And this is, like I said, not even a month or 2 months after the whole Trayvon verdict. So this thing is a perpetual thing. The contempt for the original man in this country is beyond compare, beyond reproach. You know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of times if our brothers and sisters wasn't supporting it the way that they do, we would be in a position where we'd have to support each other, solely ourselves. Like, how is it that the Chinese community can have little Chinatown and all of that for themselves and rock and have their own police force and all of that other stuff, and they still exist within the so-called American culture, so much to the point where you could be a person in Chinatown and never have to learn English. And never have to learn English and none of that. You know what I'm saying? Because you are so immersed in your culture that they don't even have to leave. Now, this ain't mean that they still ain't enslaving their people, charging them exorbitant fees, putting them in containers and tanks and dumpsters and shit and bringing them over here on boats. But they doing that to their own people, and they've created an economy where even their government support that. Even aspects of the United States government support that. So when you talk about human rights, they'll laugh at you. But when I peeped that Paula Dean verdict, I really seen how they really work, and how I was building with another elder, and he was saying, nah, once you get right in terms of your nationality, the only person that can really mess with you is another Moor. And that makes so much sense when it looks to all of the things that we've been striving to do to unify. We've been in this thing for 100 years, man. Formally, as a Moorish Science Temple. 100 years. We in the 8th month of the 100-year centennial. And there'll be different, I guess, Jubilee situations going down, but the overall agenda has still not been set. Ever since the man founded it and set it up for what it is, it still hasn't been taken to the level of which we can, and we the ones in this generation with all the knowledge. We the ones with all the knowledge and the insight on how to flip it, yet we still can't consistently agree whether or not sovereignty is an aspect of, a relevant aspect of moral science, or whether we should be dealing with law in any form or fashion, meaning that you could just be a Moor and then, you know what I mean, if anything happens, you get locked up or whatever, they treat you the way that they would treat a Muslim locked up. It's a different way, because you don't see Hindus locked up like that. You know what I'm saying? You don't see people of that nature in that type of habit locked up. You don't see a lot of Asian niggas locked up in jail and general population, all of that. Majority of people you see is the people that they've seized without a state. So if Clarence Thomas can see that, and he married to a white woman, why wouldn't you do the nonsense like that? Something wrong with you, like you're not doing the knowledge. Like you somehow, like something's wrong with you if you don't agree that certain things just can't stand. For instance, you get into an aspect of the estate, like what we were talking about. Everything that the United States has been pushing since the time that it's been doing what it's doing has been based on the law of necessity. That law of necessity has created a perpetual grantor, false grantor trust that is enacted by people being listed as preferred stocks. Therefore, the same bonds and stocks that they travel and market on that is based on the equity. Equity is that system of justice which was developed and administered by the High Court of the Chancery, right? So this automatically is bringing in England into the mix. So if any time England is brought into it, remember, in 1774 there was no United States of America, so any deal that England had with the Barbary powers or whatever was an agreement that they had with the Alamatacanos, meaning us over here. You know what I'm saying? So equity is really based on a guy named Towkinson's proposition that some words have a legal meaning very unlike their ordinary ones. You see? This is the beginning of them starting to switch everything up into the legalese. Therefore, the equity that was put into turning you from a Negro was getting you to give up your free national name. That name, after taking the aspect of it that was connected to the ancient precept, was then now put into a cesspool constructive trust for a naturally dead person that had to pay the debt back for those Caucasian people who fled from the colonies and the plantations in the New England, in England, which at the time was the 13 colonies.